How could a woman like her be with that old man? The comment cut sharply through the Friday night chatter at Murphy's Tavern in Charlotte, North Carolina. My name's Ray Emerson. I'm 54. 2 decades in the Marines train me to sense trouble before it lands in your lap. And tonight I could feel it. 3 college kids have been watching my wife, Alice, and me for the last hour, snickering, pointing, whispering from their booth. Alice gave my hand a gentle squeeze under the table. She's 49, though most people assume she's in her mid-30s. That blue dress she wore tonight made her eyes shine, and the glow from the tavern lights turned her auburn hair into fire. Even after 26 years of marriage, she can still steal my breath away. Ready to head out, honey? I asked, keeping my tone even. Just as we walked past their table, the loudest of the 3, a blonde kid in a backward cap, jumped to his feet. His 2 friends rose with him like they were his bodyguards. Blondie had on a University of North Carolina sweatshirt, maybe 160 pounds, soaking wet. He smirked and raised his voice so half the bar could hear. Seriously though, what's a woman like that doing with you? I froze. Alice's grip on my arm tightened. Around us, people turned to watch. Pete, the bartender, an old-timer who'd known us for years, paused mid-wipe on a glass, his eyes flicking toward me. She probably changes his diapers, the second kid sneered. He was thicker built, sporting a Letterman jacket from some high school. Come with us, gorgeous, he said. We'll show you what real men can do. The third one, tall and lanky with greasy hair, stepped in front of us, blocking the door. Yeah, he jeered. Grandpa probably can't even get it up. I studied them carefully. Smooth hands, designer jeans, the kind of boys who'd never been in a real fight, just watched too many movies, and thought it made them dangerous. Sure, kiddo, I said slowly, my voice calm. Alice knew that tone. She'd heard it back when I dealt with cocky recruits who thought they were smarter than their drill instructor. Steady, patient, dangerous. The blonde mistook my composure for weakness. He puffed his chest out like a rooster. What's that supposed to mean, old man? Nothing, I replied evenly. We're leaving. Alice and I started toward the exit, but I could feel them closing in behind us. The energy in the room shifted. Pete caught my eye, giving the smallest shake of his head, like he was already sorry for what was about to happen in his bar. Something told me this night wasn't done yet. 20 years ago, I would have handled it differently. Back when I was Staff Sergeant Emerson teaching hand-to-hand combat at Camp Lejeune, my patience for disrespect was razor thin. But Alice changed me. She showed me real strength wasn't about crushing every loudmouth who crossed the line. I met her in 1998, right after my 3rd deployment. She was a nurse at the VA, caring for guys like me who came back carrying more than just rucksacks. The first time I saw her, she was holding the hand of an old Vietnam vet as he broke down from nightmares. That's when I knew she was different. We married the next year. Alice always wanted children, but life didn't grant us that. Instead, we poured everything into each other. She stood by me through the brutal shift to civilian life, and I supported her through nursing school and her master's. Now, she runs the trauma unit at Presbyterian Hospital. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Alice had just been promoted to department head, and we chose Murphy's because it was where we'd had our first date. Same booth, same Friday night bustle. Even the same bartender who remembered us from when we were just starting out. But those college kids had been watching since we walked in. Their conversation paused the moment Alice slipped off her coat. They nudged each other, laughing, the blonde one craning his neck for a better look. I'd seen that same hungry look overseas, soldiers drunk on ego, eyeing something that didn't belong to them. It always ended the same way. Alice noticed too, though she brushed it off. She's used to drawing eyes. After 26 years, she still turns heads wherever we go. Most nights, I take it as a compliment. But tonight, something felt different. They're just kids, she whispered when she caught me watching them. Ignore it. We tried. But as we picked at our appetizer, I caught pieces of their whispers drifting over. Words like wasted on an old man and bet she's desperate for real action. That's when the line was crossed. The blonde kid got up to head to the restroom, and his path took him right by our table. He slowed his pace, gave Alice a look that sized her up like she was nothing more than a piece of meat, and then had the nerve to wink. For the first time that evening, Alice's confidence wavered. She turned away, clearly uncomfortable. That's when I decided it was time for us to leave. Not because I was worried about 3 college punks, but because Alice deserved a better night than listening to their trash while celebrating her promotion. I should have realized they wouldn't just let it go. The parking lot outside Murphy's was poorly lit, just a few lamps throwing long shadows across the rows of cars. We were halfway to my truck when I heard footsteps behind us. "Hey, where you going?" the blonde one called across the asphalt. We weren't done talking. I stopped walking. Alice's hand slid into mine on instinct, the way it always does when she's uneasy. In 26 years together, she's only seen me in 3 real fights, and every one of them was over before it had even begun. "Ray," she murmured, tugging gently, "let's just go." I turned. All 3 were standing under the glow of the lot's lights, smug like they owned the place. The blonde one already had his phone out, probably planning to record what he thought would be his moment of fame. The stocky guy in the Letterman jacket smirked. "We figure your wife might prefer some time with real men." The tall, wiry one snickered. "Yeah, before she forgets how that feels." Something inside me flipped. Not rage, exactly. More like a switch thrown from one mode to another. From ordinary Ray to Staff Sergeant Emerson. Alice felt the shift in the way I stood. "It's all right, sweetheart," I told her calmly, eyes never leaving the 3 of them. "These boys just want to dance a little." The blonde stepped forward. "Dance? What the hell are you talking about?" "It means," I said, dropping my keys into Alice's palm, "you followed us out here because you think you're tough. So let's find out." I slid off my jacket, folded it carefully, and handed it to her. Every move was deliberate, the same way I used to prepare before demonstrating a maneuver for young recruits. I rolled my sleeves up. One rule, one at a time. The 3 glanced at each other, then broke into laughter. The blonde shoved his phone into his pocket and cracked his knuckles. "You serious, old man? You want to take on all 3 of us?" "One at a time," I repeated. "Unless you're scared." That struck home. Pride's always the weak spot for young men. Alice edged back toward my truck. She knows what I can do, even though I haven't had to prove it in years. Back in the Corps, I train Marines in defensive tactics. I can read the tilt of a shoulder, the lean of a stance, the balance of his step. And these kids had no clue what they were about to step into. The blonde rotated his shoulders, getting ready. The other 2 shifted with him. Convince your numbers gave them the upper hand. What they didn't realize was that 2 decades of training doesn't fade just because you trade a uniform for jeans and a button-up. Just as I expected, the blonde came at me first. Ego always leads. "This one's for calling us kids, Grandpa," he shouted, winding up for what he probably believed was a knockout punch. But I'd seen it coming long before he moved. His stance gave it away. Weight rocking back. Shoulder dipping, his whole body coiling like a spring ready to snap. In the Marines, we called it slow motion Sunday. Adrenaline sharpens everything, stretches time, makes every movement clear as glass. I sidestepped just enough, and his fist tore past my ear, carried forward by all his momentum. He bet everything on that hit, stopping him cold. But when his fist cut through empty air, physics took control. He staggered forward, off balance, arms flailing wildly. I didn't even need to shove him. All it took was stepping aside, and he went face first into the brick wall outside Murphy's Tavern. The impact sounded like a melon smashing on pavement. Brad, the stocky kid in the Letterman jacket, shouted as he rushed to his friend's side. But Brad was finished. He slumped against the wall, blood pouring from his nose as he tried to process what had just happened. "My face," he mumbled through swollen lips. "You broke my face." "You broke your own face," I replied, casually brushing imaginary dust from my shirt. "I just moved." The kid in the Letterman jacket, Tyler, as I'd overheard the blonde one call him, stared at me differently now. Some of his swagger had drained away, though he was still young enough to think he could turn this around. "You just got lucky with Brad," Tyler said, tossing off his jacket. "But I played football in high school." "Good for you," I said evenly. Lowering his shoulder, Tyler charged like he was going for a tackle. But high school football moves don't hold up against someone who'd spent 20 years teaching Marines hand-to-hand combat. If it wasn't so obvious, it might have been funny. I waited until he closed the distance, then caught his arms and let his own momentum carry him sideways. Basic martial arts. Never fight force head-on, just redirect it. Suddenly, Tyler was spinning in a direction he never intended. He slammed into the metal dumpster beside Murphy's, the impact ringing out like a church bell. But his momentum didn't stop there. The dumpster was just tall enough that when he hit at the waist, his legs kept going up and over. "Help!" came his muffled voice from inside. "I'm stuck." I peered over the edge. Tyler was wedged upside down among trash bags, legs sticking up, Letterman jacket tangled over his head. He flailed like a turtle flipped on its shell. 20 years in the Marines taught me patience, boys, I said, straightening my shirt, and the value of leverage. The tall, lanky kid, Jake, I'd overheard, was already backing away. His eyes darted between his friends. Brad slumped against the wall, bloodied and dazed, Tyler kicking helplessly inside the dumpster, and me, standing calm without even breaking a sweat. "This is insane," Jake stammered. "You can't just attack people." "Attack?" I lifted an eyebrow. "Kid, I haven't laid a hand on either of your friends. They did it to themselves." Jake pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the cops." "Great idea," I said. "Be sure to tell them how 3 punks followed a married couple into a dark parking lot and threatened them." That's when Jake made his mistake. Instead of just calling or walking away, pride got the better of him. While running his mouth about the police, he cocked back his fist for a cheap shot, hoping to land one while I wasn't looking. But in the Marines, you're trained to watch everything. Peripheral vision isn't optional, it's survival. Jake swung a wild haymaker aimed at my head. I ducked, and his fist connected squarely with the parking meter behind me. The crack of bone against cast iron rang through the lot. Jake let out a scream, not a shout, not a yell, but a high-pitched wail that probably woke half the block. Clutching his hand to his chest, tears ran down his face. "My hand," he cried. "You broke my hand." "You broke your own hand," I said calmly, the same way I used to explain hard lessons to recruits. "I just ducked. You just punched a parking meter." By then, people were spilling out of Murphy's to see what the noise was about. Pete, the bartender, stood in the doorway shaking his head. A few of the regulars already had their phones out, filming the aftermath. Brad was slumped against the wall, blood smeared across his University of North Carolina sweatshirt, looking like he'd gone a few brutal rounds with Mike Tyson. Tyler was still stuck upside down in the dumpster, his movements slowing as exhaustion set in. Jake sat on the pavement, clutching his hand and sobbing. "Somebody call an ambulance." Jake begged the gathering crowd. "Already did," replied a woman I recognized from inside the bar. As soon as we heard the screaming, Alice walked over and handed me my jacket. Her eyes held that familiar look, the one that reminded me of how she saw me 27 years ago when we first met. Not as the middle-aged insurance adjuster worried about lawn care and retirement plans, but as the Marine who could take on anything. "You all right, sweetheart?" I asked while sliding my arms into the jacket. "Perfect," she answered, linking her arm through mine. That's when Jake made one last desperate attempt. "He assaulted us," he shouted to the onlookers. "This old man attacked 3 college students." Pete stepped forward. "Kid, I watched the whole thing through the window. You 3 followed this couple outside and started it. This man didn't throw a single punch." "That's true," added the woman who'd called for help. "I was recording on my phone. Got everything. These boys basically wrecked themselves trying to fight someone who clearly knew what he was doing." Jake's face drained of color as it sank in that his story wasn't going to stick. But he had to do something. "He moved," Pete said flatly. "You boys did all that damage on your own." The sound of sirens grew louder, ambulance and police both. Alice squeezed my arm. "We should probably stay and give a statement." "Already planned on it," I said. The reality was beginning to dawn on those 3 kids. They'd gone after someone they assumed would be easy prey, and instead they'd embarrassed themselves in front of half the bar, and on video. Tyler finally crawled out of the dumpster, his Letterman jacket ruined, his body reeking of spoiled trash. He smelled of old garbage and humiliation. "This isn't over," Brad muttered through busted lips, but there was no fight left in his voice. "Yeah, it is," I told him. It was over before it even started. The ambulance rolled into the lot, followed by 2 squad cars. As the EMTs began tending to the college boys, I saw the truth settle on their faces. They'd have to explain to their parents, their classmates, maybe even their professors, how 3 of them had been beaten down by a 54-year-old man who never landed a single punch. Alice had been right. This wasn't the way we planned to finish our anniversary dinner. But somehow it felt like the only way it could have ended. Officer Patricia Williams came over to take our statements while her partner, Officer Davidson, dealt with the 3 students. I'd known Pat for years through veteran support groups at the hospital where Alice worked. She listened carefully as I recounted everything, occasionally checking the videos the witnesses had captured. "So let me make sure I've got this straight," Pat said, reviewing her notes. "They followed you into the parking lot, threatened you, and each one got hurt while trying to attack you." "That's correct," I confirmed. "I just redirected their momentum against them." "Defensive tactics," Pat repeated, writing it down. 20 years in the Marines. That's what I told them when asked. Staff Sergeant, retired. Alice stayed close by my side, her hand still wrapped around mine. Every time I responded, she squeezed my fingers, her pride radiating through that simple gesture. Near the ambulance, the medics were working on the 3 boys. Brad was getting stitches for the gash across his forehead and nose. Jake's hand was a mess, swollen and clearly broken in more than one spot. Tyler didn't have much in the way of physical injuries, but he reeked of trash and his pride was shredded. Officer Davidson returned from questioning the college kids. "Here's the problem," he said. "Their version doesn't line up with what the witnesses reported." "How's that?" Pat asked. "They're claiming Mr. Emerson attacked first," Davidson explained. "But we've got 3 separate cell phone videos showing them following the couple into the lot and starting the whole thing." I wasn't surprised. Young guys, humiliated, always try to twist the story in their favor. "They also keep insisting he must have struck them somehow," Davidson went on. "They just can't believe they managed to hurt themselves." The bartender, Pete, came over to join us. "Officers, I've been serving drinks for 3 decades. I've seen every brawl you could think of. This wasn't a fight. This was 3 drunk punks trying to mess with the wrong guy, and physics teaching them a hard lesson." By then, EMTs had Jake on a stretcher, his hand strapped into a temporary splint. Brad had refused the ride to the hospital, though he looked like he'd gone a few rounds with a freight train. Tyler was being questioned apart from the others by another officer who had just arrived. "Are we cleared to leave?" Alice asked. Pat nodded. "We've got your contact info if we need more. But honestly, this one's pretty cut and dry. 3 intoxicated individuals harassed a couple, then ended up hurting themselves while trying to start a fight." As we headed toward my truck, I caught Jake's voice coming from the ambulance. He was on the phone, likely with his parents. "Mom, you don't get it," he said urgently. "This old dude, he had to be some kind of martial arts master or something. He wrecked us without even trying." Alice stifled a laugh. "Martial arts master?" "Close enough," I replied, holding her door open. I started the engine just as Tyler shuffled past, still reeking of garbage, his ruined Letterman jacket hanging limp over his arm. He glanced at me through the windshield, his eyes torn between fear and respect. Brad leaned against a buddy's car, bloody tissues pressed to his face, animatedly pointing in my direction while talking on the phone. "They'll never forget tonight," Alice said as we pulled out. "Good," I told her. "Maybe next time they'll think twice before harassing someone." But deep down, I had the feeling their troubles were just beginning. 2 weeks later, Alice slid her phone across the breakfast table. "Honey, you've got to see this," she said, barely able to contain her laughter. The video had racked up over 2 million views across social media. Someone had stitched together all 3 witness recordings into one flawless edit, complete with slow-motion replays and commentary. The title read, "3 college bros get humbled by Marine Grandpa without him throwing a single punch." I watched as Brad slammed into the wall in slow motion, followed by Tyler's dumpster dive, replayed with dramatic music. Jake's disastrous moment came when he collided with the parking meter, his panic scream frozen on screen in a series of still shots capturing his horrified face. "It's everywhere," Alice muttered, scrolling through endless comments. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Someone had even turned it into a meme. And the replies were merciless. "Imagine being so fragile that physics itself takes you down." These guys thought they were the ultimate tough men, yet the Marine hadn't even broken a sweat. What started as bravado ended in humiliation, but the fallout reached far beyond online ridicule. Through her contacts at the hospital, Alice had heard that UNC students quickly identified all three boys from the clip. Their names, fraternity houses, and even their social media profiles had been exposed. The university had launched a formal disciplinary review after the video blew up, worried about how harassment of locals reflected on its image. Brad and Tyler were now staring down suspension. Jake, already on academic probation, was headed straight toward expulsion. Their fraternity, once a shield of privilege, wasted no time suspending all three while the school deliberated. The same group that had convinced them they were untouchable now wanted nothing to do with them. "Check this one out," Alice said, holding up her phone. It was a comment from someone who claimed to know the trio personally. These guys used to strut around like they owned campus. Now they can't show their faces without being a punchline. The viral clip had turned into a cautionary tale. Campus security departments across the state began using it in training presentations about harassment and assault. Self-defense instructors showcased it to prove how technique alone could defuse threats without escalating to violence. The three young men who thought they'd humiliate an older couple had instead delivered weeks of free entertainment to the internet at their own expense. 6 months later, Alice and I went back to Murphy's Tavern to celebrate our anniversary. Pete met us at the entrance with a wide grin. "The famous couple," he shouted to the room. "Drinks are on the house for our local legends." The booth we'd once occupied had become something of a landmark, unofficially christened the Emerson Table. Pete had even mounted a small plaque on the wall, where respect was earned and lessons were learned. Over dinner, Alice shared what she had uncovered about our three young acquaintances through her contacts at the hospital. Brad had ended up transferring to another school after being permanently expelled from his fraternity. The injuries from smashing into the brick wall had left deep scars, and though plastic surgery repaired much of the damage, his reflection still carried a lasting reminder of that night. Tyler's path had collapsed completely. He dropped out of college after losing his football scholarship when the video spread. His parents were humiliated as the clip made its way across their social circles online. Now he was back at home, stocking shelves at a grocery store, working slowly to rebuild his reputation day by day. Jake had it the hardest. His shattered hand required several surgeries and months of therapy. The injury crushed his hopes of a professional baseball career. Coupled with his expulsion, he lost both his athletic ambitions and his education in a single night. "Do you ever feel any sympathy for them?" Alice asked, slicing into her salmon. I thought for a moment, glancing around at the familiar Friday crowd. Couples on dates, families gathered for dinner, and people our age enjoying a calm evening out. "They chose their path," I finally said. "Every action carries a consequence. I only made sure they faced it sooner than they expected." Alice lifted her wine glass with a faint smile. "To consequences. To consequences," I echoed. When we left Murphy's that evening, I held the door for her and watched as she stepped into the same parking lot where those three young men had been taught the harshest lesson of their lives. The streetlights still painted long shadows, but everything felt changed, quieter, settled. Brad, Tyler, and Jake had discovered that respect is never owed simply because you demand it, and that real strength doesn't come from preying on those who appear weaker. Their humiliation online had followed them into the real world, stripping away friendships, opportunities, and standing in their community. The viral footage had become a permanent stain on their reputations, searchable by employers, potential partners, or anyone curious enough to type their names into a search bar. Their attempts to claim victimhood collapsed under eyewitness accounts and undeniable video evidence, leaving them to deal not only with physical consequences, but also with the loss of trust and respect from their families, peers, and institutions. The three learned the hard truth. Some mistakes echo far beyond the moment they're made, and a few reckless seconds can alter an entire future. And sometimes the greatest victories are the ones achieved without ever throwing a single punch.